It is a dark age in the American academy. According to research by the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, called FIRE, hundreds of colleges around this country have policies encouraging students to report any offensive speech or other crime think they overhear from their classmates. Once such thought crime is reported, squads with Orwellian names like Bias Incident Response Team swoop in and impose all manner of penalties. These range from sensitivity training to suspension. Bias response teams?
Not only is it real, it's really horrifyingly widespread. We found more than 230 of these teams in our searches across campuses nationwide, and we're sure there's more that we haven't identified. The ones we found, though, cover and they monitor the speech of 2.84 million students.
So the idea is that the school is sending out students to tattle on other students for saying things they believe is what, offensive, indecent, inappropriate? Like, what's the standard?
In some cases, and the standard varies, but they are actually trying to seek out bias and destroy it on campuses. And so through a series of online forms that you often fill out, or just encouraging students. I mean, we see, if you see something, say something on some of these bias response team websites.
Administrators at Michigan State have banned whiteboards from the school's dormitories, or they plan to next year, because sometimes students let offensive messages wind up on them. Well, heaven forbid students ever be offended, so the boards had to go. The Lansing branch of the NAACP, meanwhile, has hailed the ban as, quote, a victory for the school's black community.
We don't want to divide the country. We want to be stronger together. That is just how we need to operate.
Why would you be against taking out a means of communication, a whiteboard? I mean, it's not the ideal means of communication, but, you know, maybe we live, I don't know if this occurred to you, in such a world, an Orwellian world, where people are punished for what they believe and say, that maybe they feel like the only outlet is on a whiteboard. And so why would we want to take that away from them?
So again, what I'm going to say is I actually think the whiteboard ban distracts from the bigger issue. And I am 100% willing to have those conversations. I think those conversations are important. You know, what's common right now...
I'm sorry, let me stop you. What does that mean? I mean, you're either for people being allowed to write what they think on a whiteboard, or you're not. I mean, that may be a distraction from another issue, but it's still an issue itself. So why wouldn't I be allowed to write on a whiteboard? I don't understand.
I think the issue at hand is that you need to go into conversations with an open mentality. Right now, you know, while I'm talking to you, I'm really trying to understand where you're coming from, because the truth is, every single person, regardless of their political affiliation, regardless of where they came from, you know, they have a reason why they think how they think. And to make progress in our society, we need to recognize that. And you might not disagree, or you might not agree with what they think, you might not agree with the method of how they got there, but the truth is, once we start to understand why people think how they do, we can start to have productive conversations.
Okay, but I mean, everything you're saying is obvious, and I think most people would agree with it. But again, you need to be allowed to say what you think. And what you think doesn't have to be popular or constructive or polite for you to be allowed to say. You have an absolute right to express your views, period.
You're right.
Do they not teach?
Right.
Okay, then, and that would include whiteboards, no? I mean, it's kind of simple.
UCLA is a microcosm of the macrocosm. They continuously and consistently trample students' rights. And we can go over just some recent examples. The Kanye Western party. These were fraternity and sorority members throwing a party at Kanye West and Kim Kardashian. There was an immediate rush to judgment because somebody thought there was black soot on one of the students' face, that it was blackface. And instead of according the students due process of investigating the facts, there was an immediate suspension on the fraternity. Worse than that, the administrators, as they do each and every time one of these instances occur, they threatened the students in one of their email missives that they're immediately going to investigate this hateful, offensive speech and use all lawful resources for students who found to have engaged in intimidation or harassment. There is no offensiveness exception to the First Amendment. There is no hate speech exception to the First Amendment. There is no hateful exception to the First Amendment.
You're going to have a rule, a standard. You ought to have to define it, especially if there's a penalty attached to it, right? So do kids know what's in bounds and what's outside of bounds?
I don't think they do, and it varies from place to place. Some, it depends on the protected classes that are covered by the bias response teams.
They use the law. They abuse the law, they twist the law, they send out these interiorum emails which either chill speech that they don't like, or they actually punish students that run afoul of these types of policies that don't conform to their liberal ideology.
You're not allowed to try to either relate to somebody or avoid relating to them based on a stereotype that you might have in your mind. So not only can you not, you can't even avoid folks based on these things, or it can be reported as a biased report.
If you're going to ban whiteboards, why stop there? Why not ban pens and keyboards and other instruments of divergent opinion and just kind of suppress speech and everyone would be happy? I mean, it is kind of what is happening. Is there a list somewhere? Is there like a Bible of bias? Like, where do you go to find out what the rules are?
Well, Fire has put out this bias response teams report, and so if you're at one of the schools there, you can look, and we've tabulated that on our website, thefire.org. But frankly, for most students, they're going to have to search around for bias response team or something like that on their website and find out what they can be reported for.
Let me give you another good example. There was SJP and MSA. Two student organizations on campus. There were posters linking them to Hamas. Now, the university, again, came out and criticized these posters as being hateful, offensive, and if students were found involved, they would be brought up on conduct code charges. Again, for the points I just enumerated, that violates the First Amendment. The UCLA has a viewpoint discriminatory application of its own policies. Let's put aside for a second that it violates the First Amendment. Last week, in the Daily Bruin, there was an anti-Semitic cartoon of the worst sort. It was a standard anti-Semitic trope with Netanyahu with a big nose, and it had the 10 Commandments in the background, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not murder, implying that Israel will murder to achieve its settlements. Not a word from the administration. How is this instance with the cartoon any different with the poster?
Effectively, these are all going into a big database, generally controlled by the government. 42% of these bias response teams include police departments. And so, for instance, at Dartmouth, if you go to their bias response form and you can anonymously put something in, that goes straight to the judicial affairs folks and the police.
This is like the Cultural Revolution, really, the search for kulaks. These are crypto government institutions. All colleges are, almost all. They take massive amounts of federal dollars. And yet they're encouraging the violation of constitutional rights, the most basic one, the freedom of speech. Where's the Justice Department in this? Where's the Civil Rights Division? Shouldn't they be swooping in and protecting kids from having their rights taken away?
Well, one of the oddities of federal law is that it actually doesn't cover First Amendment violations, while laws like Title VI and Title IX, which have to do with racial and sexual discrimination, those are enforced through the potential loss of federal funding. The First Amendment and free speech is not among those laws.